In this session of SketchUp, we will be looking at creating a table model, having our bedroom sketched, and the color exercise. So there's a Session3 folder. Go ahead and download that and unzip the file. If you need help, there's information on how to do that in Talon, how to unzip a file. The grades have been posted on Talon. You can go to the grades section up there on the top, and it'll go to your grade book and show you what your grades are. Now, if you've gotten nothing turned in, you got a 0. If that's the case, come see me. We need to talk a little bit, make sure I understand how to upload files. Officially, there is no redo for that, but because this is the first major assignment and it is worth 3 points, that it would be good to maybe talk about it and maybe have you try again to upload and have that all done. It's important for you to have these points. If you've got a 1 for each one of the 3 points that you could have gotten graded on, you would have gotten a 1 and it was done well enough. Good for you. If you got a 0.1 on some of them, so you might get a 1.2 or a 2.1 grade in this time around. And that being the case that one of them was a little bit off, in which case I wrote some comments, and you're welcome to take a look at that, look at those comments, and adjust, and then send me an email with the updated file. Typically, if you get a 0.1 on any one assignment, when you're resubmitted, you get a 0.9. Again, because this is the first time we're doing this, it's one of the major points, I will reconsider and give you a full point if you submit it again, and it is done correctly this time. And if you submitted it at least 2 days earlier, you got a 1.1. So that was an extra 0.1 for the assignments. So that'd be great, a little extra points for that, and good for you for turning it in earlier. If you want to see what you submitted and my comments, though, they're not in Gradebook. They are under Course Content, Submission Review. So you click on Course Content, Submission Review, and it'll show you something like this, where you see the submissions were submitted, what the score was, and then some feedback. And the feedback is my comments. So go ahead and do that, open it up, and see what it says. And even if you've gotten full points, there may be some comments there that are worth looking at, and something I might want to suggest. So it may have been good enough, but there may be something I want to bring to your attention for the future. Finally, if you think your grade is an error, then let me know. We'll start to take a look at it and see what's missing or what's different. You're always welcome to ask, and I think that would be for pretty much any instructor. Assume that maybe the grade is right, but assume that the grade may be not right, and in which case, just kindly ask the instructor to kind of review it with you and see what happened that you didn't get the full points you expected. Be polite and give everyone the benefit of the doubt. I certainly would not have actually gone out of my way to make sure you've gotten a bad point. Something to be aware of at this point: you should be working on your SketchUp. You should have gotten it from the company. It should be the student version just fine. If it still says trial mode, like X days left, that means you're not working on the student version. Or if you did, you've never kind of put in the registration information or whatever was necessary to convert it out of a trial mode. And what will happen is after those days are done, it will lock up and you will not be able to open up SketchUp and use it. So please make sure that if you still see this at the top, when you open up the SketchUp program, that you address it right away. One other thing that probably has been popping up, and I know at least one student asked me about this, is the bug splat. And this happens occasionally, but it happens to everybody, even professionals as well as not. So I just want to be aware of that and be aware if that happens. Hopefully you've saved your file along the way. If not, please save often. You'll get to the last save. It'll open back up again. You'll get basically to the last save. But this happens, and it is very frustrating. So just get used to it every 2 or 3 times. By the way, this would be good to any program you're working on to have it saved regularly, to you save it regularly. Okay. You've also worked on the 2 shares and submitted them. Hopefully it wasn't such a complicated thing. Now, they're basically the same chair, right? You're just doing it twice with an additive method and a subtractive method. And inside the folder that you downloaded, there's a PDF of the 2 chairs, basically in text format, going through the steps you did watching the video. So it's well worth looking at. And what's important for you to notice is the terminology used in text format. What did they call things? How did they ask you to do things? what kind of verbs did they use, and so forth. And this is going to be important for next session, the session after this one, where you will be looking at something and actually writing the steps involved in making it. So do take some time to look this over. So our chairs were simple. Even the one we did in class was a relatively simple chair. But you can get a pretty complex chair real easily in SketchUp. Remember that intersect with model parts and then just moving things around and so forth. So they could be a pretty exotic chair. This is an example of one here. And we're just using simple shapes right now for learning purposes. But that doesn't mean you can only draw simple things in SketchUp. One thing, though, we want to be aware of is how big the file becomes. Because after a point, it becomes really awkward to work with. It takes a long time to open up, takes a long time to save. So one way we do this is to look at the models we're making, and if there's any sort of symmetry, to create one half, and then copy it, mirror it, and put the two halves together. And so what this is showing you here is this is one half of the chair. That is actually one part of the model. And that was copied and mirrored and then put on the other side. So this here is the same half, just mirrored. And there are many items that are built that have symmetry, either radial symmetry or bilateral symmetry. But we've got that there. And of course, there are some hard lines here, but we don't notice it because we've softened the edges. Remember, eraser with the control button pressed will soften edges. Also, some edges were hidden. We'll talk about that later on, but we can hide some edges sometimes. In this case, there is no black line going down the middle of this chair because the line was hidden and the two halves put together. The line's still there, it's just hidden.
Inferencing allows you to reference the axis or other geometry while you're drawing in SketchUp. Basically, this makes drawing accurately very fast and easy. Start by drawing a line and notice it snaps in the red, green, and blue axis. These are basic inference directions, but they become more powerful when combined with other geometry. For example, drawing this edge in the red direction is simple enough, but we can line this edge up with other edges in the scene with inferencing. SketchUp will automatically align to the most recent geometry you've drawn, but you can always ask SketchUp to reference any existing geometry. Simply hover over the point you're interested in for a few moments, then move back to drawing your line, and it infers to that point. This is a key feature of SketchUp, so let's practice it a few times. As you look at these examples, consider this important tip. When combining multiple inferences, such as an axis direction and referencing other geometry, you need to be careful to use both inferences. If you're new to inferring, take your time and make sure you see both inference lines when starting or finishing an edge. When using inferences, there are also inference points you can infer to as well. Every edge has a green endpoint, a cyan midpoint, and everywhere else on the edge is shown with a red on-edge point. Where two edges cross over each other, it is shown with a black intersection point. When working in SketchUp, you can infer to all of these points. In addition to the axis directions, you can in fact infer to any edge direction. You can see by hovering over this edge for a few moments, it's possible to draw an edge that is parallel to that original edge, and you can use this direction in combination with other inferences as well. One last tip for drawing and inferring in non-axis directions is to create a construction line with the tape measure tool. This lets you easily draw along that edge and infer while you do. Beyond drawing edges, remember that you can use inferences while moving objects. While using push-pull or the offset tool, and actually with most SketchUp tools. After learning about basic inferences, be sure to watch the video on inference locking, which makes the process of drawing with inferences even faster.
The PDF of the lecture has the link, so you can go and watch this past video again, just this one video alone. This particular link goes to the arrow keys and how you can use the arrow keys, and inferencing down with the arrow keys will get you perpendicular and or parallel. That's one of the things. So up is the up arrow key will always go in the blue axis, and up and down. The right arrow key would go in the red axis. Think of right is red. The left arrow key, of course, is the green is the other axis, and then that down arrow key is kind of tied in with perpendicular or parallel to a shape or an object. So use those keys to lock things in directions, because we're working in 3Ds and it's going to want to snap to things. The cursor wants to snap to ends and edges and corners and midpoints, and sometimes you don't want that. You just want it to go in a certain direction. So the arrow keys help you with that. But that YouTube link is also good. Some people may not have gotten through the third chair last session, and I was hoping to do it this session. But I think we have a video we can look at, and there's a YouTube link for that video. Go ahead and go there and walk through the last bit of the steps. And then make sure you email me if you have any questions or it's not quite working right. I'll do my best to explain what's going on or what to think about. Also, if you look at the last session, some of the slides in the last session we had talk a little bit about the seat and the follow me tool and so forth. Those are some of those pieces that we didn't quite get through. It's important. One thing that's important to do is to make sure you erase certain lines that need to be erased. So if the video says erase this first before you do that, it's important for you to do that. And make sure that you've gone to the edges so that the piece does indeed break into two separate segments. But the idea is you really should have this done before you do the next step. So this third chair really needs to be complete and correct before you go on to the next steps. And those steps are creating a table from your chair. So now you would have a matching table that would match this chair style, sort of. Ideally, you show me the chair first to me, but because we're doing this kind of virtually this time around, I would just go ahead and move forward with your chair, and if necessary, when we come back in class next session, we can look it over, and if there's anything that needs to be adjusted, we'll adjust it together, and I'm sure it will be fine. But what you want is you want to basically have the chair done, and you're happy with it, and then the next steps in this lecture will get you to make the table, and then you'll be ready to go. So if we were in class, I would walk you through this, much like I'm doing now, and then let you work on your own for the class period. So our class would not be a very long lecture part necessarily, because we'll have the rest of the time to kind of work through the steps, and I'd be able to help you there. That is one disadvantage of doing it this way, but I'd rather you get this information and start working on this. And you can always catch me next week in our next session, either before or after, and we can kind of talk through some things that you have problems with. So I would say, hey, you need to follow this assignment on your own, and that you would have only had the words of the lecture to follow. One thing I gotta tell you is, though, that one good technique to use when working on anything, either a book or a video or anything, is to orient your scene to match what the video or the book shows. So you want to try always do that, and it makes it very helpful. So the first thing you would do is you would save your chair model as table. And I can't stress this enough. Sometimes students have actually erased their chair model altogether and created a table with no chair. So make sure you save your chair model as chair, and then do save as, file, save as, table. And one of the first things you will do is get rid of the top part of the chair, because we don't need that. We only need the chair legs to be table legs. Then I ask you to make a rectangle, and I tell you the size of it. Again, I'm not telling you step by step anymore. We've done rectangles. You know how to input information. You're not going to type in these X's, right? That's not what you're going to type in. And you can't do this all at once. You need to use the rectangle and the push-pull tool to create the slab. Then I want you to zoom up to that bottom portion of the table and draw a little wedge there, just like we did before. So instead of being on the top, like we did for the chair, it'd be on the bottom. Hey, refer back to this lecture here, to this particular video, and look at timestamp 1746 and go from there. Because that shows you how to do that follow me on the chair seat, so it'll happen the same on the tabletop. So you're going to orbit underneath, select the bottom, and then select the follow me tool, and select that little wedge. And when you do that, it'll create this kind of bevel around the bottom of the table and give it kind of interesting profile. We use the offset tool and click on the edge and drag inward. So click on the edge and drag inward 1.5, and that's going to begin the apron of the table. Then we're going to drag that inner line in again, another 1.5. So we did it twice. So we got parallel lines around the perimeter. And then we pull those parallel lines down for 4 inches, and this will give us our apron. So now we triple click this or do a big window around this or something to select the whole thing and make it a component. Then it acts like one element. And I would call it something like tabletop or something like that, or something that makes sense that you know what it is you're looking at. For the legs now, we're going to click and drag them up. And we're going to drag them up 4 inches. Then we're going to move them in position around the table. And we're going to grab one leg at one point and move it over to the edge of the table and snap it on the inside corner. So it's important to know where to grab from. We're going to grab, let's say, this corner right here and drag it to the inner corner in here. So underneath the tabletop, it's going to go right to that inner corner. And so then we orbit around and it'll stick out. So we've snapped to the inside corner here, so that when you put the leg in place, it'll come out through and you'll see it on the other side. So hopefully that will make sense to you. Which means you're going to have to orbit to get to all of the sides well. So again, notice that this area here, right, that is the edge that we snap to. You don't even see the leg at that point. Here's another example. We moved it into position. Again, you don't even see the leg here. It's sticking out on the outside, and you need to orbit to do that. So this is one side, and then we orbit to here. Now you see the red line's here, the green line's there before the green line's over here. Then we orbit again. Now the red line's here. So you're going to orbit around to get to that inside corner that you want to get to. And again, I can't stress enough, these stick out over here, but in here on the inside corner, when you get that leg in, you're not going to see the leg. So now we have to make it the right height, because at this point, the legs are only chair leg height, right? We need to now stretch them and make them larger or longer. So I'm going to do a tape measure line and bring that tape measure line from the top of the table straight down and type in 2'6" or 30 inches. That is the distance typical of a standard height table, 2'6" or 30 inches. And so now we have a line here that we are going to be able to snap to. For the next step, I want you to get inside of the leg component. And when you click inside, double click to get inside one of the leg components. When you do so, you will see that the bounding box opens up and everything else turns either green or grayed out depending on what you're doing. And you'll have only the leg that is the front face white looking everywhere. Then I want you to triple click on the leg, or again do a big window around it. And then use the scale tool. Use the scale tool. And the scale tool gives us these grips. And there'll be grips all around. It operates similarly to the picture tool in, let's say, Word. If you have inserted a picture in Word, make things larger or smaller, it works the same way. And notice this is basically a three-dimensional grip. And you want the middle grip of the bottom piece, because that's what we want to stretch to be the right size. So you click to pick it up, no dragging involved, and then you click the line. And when you click the line, this thing will just stretch, and it'll look something like this. So let's go back a second. You will click the middle center, to pick up that point, and then you'll click the line. Notice the cursor is not touching this dot. I can still move my cursor anywhere I want. But when you bring it down, it should want to snap to this line because it's looking for something to snap to. That's what SketchUp does. And then I really want you to do a tape measure line. Do a tape measure. Do a dimension line, and click from the top of the table to the bottom of the chair, top of the table. So I want you to do a dimension line and click the top of the table, grab a corner or something like that, and then click the bottom of the leg, and it should say 2'6", in which case you got the right height. If it says anything else, it didn't quite work. You can look at this video link here, and it goes step by step again. And then select the table and all its legs and move it to the origin. So now we have it in the right spot. Remember, we do want our models to come in, snap to the origin. It'll be easier when we bring it into another model, for example. Go into the tabletop and triple click and select intersect faces with model. We're doing this at this point because we need to clean it up. We need to clean up the top so that we don't have extra lines and extra surfaces that we are working with. It's always good to make your model smaller by reducing things you're not seeing necessarily. Then this is a little technique. So we're still inside of the tabletop. So let's go back here. We double click to get inside the tabletop. We go in here. We're still inside the tabletop. And then we go to View, Component Edit, Hide Rest of Model. And all the legs suddenly disappear. Well, they're still there. The difference is that since we are in the table component, the legs are hidden on us. And that gives us ability to work with what we did. Right? Remember, intersect with faces with model we did before? Those are intersection lines that we don't really need. And all we need to do is just pull this box up and then erase it, and it'll be cleaned up. That's a cleaned up corner. And you did it all 4 times for the 4 legs. Then go to View, Component Edit, and click Hide Rest of Model, and the legs will suddenly show up again. They'll still be green because you're inside the tabletop. So now while we're still in the table component, the tabletop component, go to the Paint Bucket tool and select a material you like. It could be a color because we can paint this table. It could be wood. It could be glass. It could be tile. It could be any material you like. It's your design and you are designing it. So that is fine. But we want to make sure that we're inside the component so we can just paint the tabletop. And then click outside and go inside one of the legs and paint the legs. So when you're done, the table should be painted. And it could be all the same color. It could be different colors. It's up to you how unique you want to make your table. That's fine. However, whatever you do to your table needs to be done to the chair so that they match. So whatever style you do here, something similar should be here. So when I look at them, I say, oh, that's a set. They go together. So they have to match. So you may want to note which colors you're using. You may want to note it all. Make sure that you do it, that you make it match so that they look like they belong. So hopefully that will be good, and this is all due next session. Now I'd like you to kind of step back a little bit and do some measurements. I'd like you to go and measure your bedroom or the bedroom of a significant other, a brother, a mother, sister, and measure the room out, making like overall lengths, where doors are, where windows are. And these are some of the graphics. Like this would be a graphic of a swinging door. It shows the direction of the swing, shows the arc of the swing. I've noted the size of the door. It's 2'4" by 6'8". That's how I did it. There's different ways of noting it as long as you know what it is. I typed in hollow core. That's why I did HC. That's what that means. I made a couple of lines here for my rod and shelf in the closet. And this is a small little closet. It's got a 4' by 6'8" bifold door. So this is what a bifold looks like, 2 little V's kind of hanging in there. Again, another door here. This here is an opening. So I just made an opening here. It's not like a doorway, but no door. It's just an opening. It's 4' by 6'8", and it's a cased opening. The opening is cased. It's got gypsum board around it. Here is an example of a window. So hopefully these symbols look familiar to you from blueprint reading class. But this is a window here, and this is the overall size of the window. 78 inches by 60 inches. And then I note where the window is from the edge of the wall. I note the length of the wall on the inside. I know where the closet is and so forth. So all these are dimensions. And you should also notice particular heights. Like I said this was a 6'8" tall door. So now I know how big to make the door. I need for you to also sketch out the doors and windows locations and what they look like. So there's that opening I talked about on that one wall. This is the wall with the window. I can see my baseboard. And I said it was a 3.5 inch baseboard. Okay, I got that. And here's the door. It's a 6-panel door. That's what it looks like. So you should sketch out something that looks the same. It doesn't have to be quite this crisp, but you do need to say that. And the other thing too is, like for example here, I noted the height of the window, where the head of the window is at. And that's going to be very helpful. So on this plan, I know how far it is from the wall. This tells me how big it is, height and width. And then this one here tells me how high it is off the floor. So I need all that information. And it needs to be a hand sketch. It doesn't have to be hard line. It could be freehand. But it just has to have information. I'm not looking for a SketchUp model at this point. I just wanted these straight sketches. It's very handy to have a helper with you. So here's an example of someone holding up a tape measure. And the way we figured out the location of the height of the window was just putting a tape measure there on the floor and going up. But this also gave us the location, for example, of the baseboard height, where the sill of the window is, the thickness of the trim. All that was there. And the way I did it was I just had a running number count. So for example, from the bottom here to here was 3.5 inches. From the bottom here to here was 22.75 inches. From the bottom here to there was 25 inches. Doing it this way, there's less chance of dimension creep, because when you start adding dimensions, sometimes you can get that if you do a lot of little partials, because some things don't fall exactly on one side or the other of the line. But this way, as long as you come from the same point and go up, it works pretty well. What you do then in SketchUp, when you end up drawing it, which by the way, we're not doing this yet, you just need to get the numbers first. But what you could do is offset up 3.5. Use the offset tool. Offset up 22.75. Offset again to 25. And now I've got these lines that I can snap to. So in other words, don't measure a lot of little partials. Put the stick down on one side and drag it across the other side to the other side of the room, and then just do parts and pieces, or from the bottom to from the top. Just kind of figure it out. For thicknesses, all walls have thicknesses, right? So you need to consider that when you do. If you can somehow open the window and put the tape measure out, even better, for the thickness of the wall and even the thickness of the window. But if you can't, you can do a good guesstimate, and sometimes you can't. This one here is the cased opening wall. I know now it's like 4 3/4 inches wide. I know this wall is about 8 inches total, maybe 7 3/4 from the outside to here. It looks like it might be 7 3/4. So that's what I would do. Now, let's say you can't measure it, or maybe there's no window on that wall, or there's no opening on that wall, so you really can't get to it. Like, there's some parts where you just can't get to. What should you think about? Well, if it's an inside wall, and it's a wood stud wall with drywall, it's a typical type wall, it's about 4.5 inches wide. If it's an exterior wall, let's say with siding on the outside, it's probably 6.5 inches. If it's got brick, it might be 10 inches thick, right? So if you've got, it's a wood wall, but it's got brick on the outside, that might be as much as 10 inches thick. The exterior block wall with drywall, so if like some people have basement bedrooms, and so if you have exterior block wall with drywall on the inside, you can imagine either 9 5/8 or 11 5/8. If it's a concrete wall, maybe 10 inches or 12 inches. And for this model, you can round some numbers, okay? So for example, if you say, Jorge, for this model, I just want to use 4 inches instead of 4.5 and things like that, that would be okay. But I do know that some offices, they're going to want you to use the exact 4.5 and the exact 6.5. So, and it's the exact set 11 5/8. And this is what you would type: 4 space 1/2, 11 space 5/8, enter, and then you get the right dimensions, okay? And it's all inches, so you don't have to put any inch symbol. I also would like photos, digital photos. That'll help me remember things about the room, for example. Many times I've gone to measure things. I go back to the office and I'm like, oh shoot, how'd that corner work? Or the dimension's not quite what I expect it to be. And you're like thinking about how did that get to be that way? So this way, by taking photos, you can go back and say, oh, that window's like there. Oh, it's that close to, okay, I got it. Or, oh yes, it's a 6-panel door. I didn't know if it was 6 or 8 panels. I didn't remember, blah, blah. You know, you go back to the office and you may not remember what these things look like. Or where it hinges. Maybe you put the door and it's like, it doesn't look like it's supposed to hinge like that. Did I get that right? So your assignment is to sketch your bedroom and add notes and dimensions as much as needed. The goal is that can you redraw it exactly correctly without having to go back to the room to remeasure. That's the idea. Now, of course, the significant other needs to be someone you can get to relatively easily to measure their bedroom. So if you do have to go back because you don't have all the information, you can easily go back there. So for example, some students in the past have gone back to their parents' house, in Chicago or something. It's like, no, that would not be a good bedroom to measure, because unless you can go there quickly and back quickly, it would take too much time, and you need to be able to remeasure, because we're eventually going to be modeling this in SketchUp. And so I've had some students start modeling and realize, oh, I don't have a dimension that I thought I had, even after I thought I had it all. And so they can just quickly take the tape measure and measure it out. So again, if we were in school, in class, I would have said, hey, we have a video to watch in the classroom. And it's this one here on the color exercise. Let's look at the color exercise now. And then I can give you a link at the bottom so you can refer to it specifically again. In this video, we will look at some color concepts that will be helpful as we design. So first of all, we have to have a certain common language to discuss color. And it's not very easy. For example, when we define space, we have length, width, and height. And that information gives us some idea of what that space contains. We have a similar way to describe color: hue, value, and chroma. And this is the order in which you want to define color. So what is hue? Hue is the name of the color. When you look at a color, is it a red? Is it a blue? Is it a green? What basically is it? Then the value is whether it is light or dark. If it's got low value, it's a darkish color. If it's a high value, it's very light. And the value scale are grays. If you squint your eyes just a little bit, you can see the grayscale a lot better in a color. The hue becomes less pronounced. Finally, chroma. Chroma is saturation. How strong is the color? A strong color is bright and intense, and a weak color is kind of dull and grayish. Gray is one of those colors that possess neither chroma nor hue. It is only value. These two concepts can be put together and create a virtual globe where the axis of the globe goes from light to dark. That's the value scale. And then around the equator, the colors go from weak to strong, and that is the chroma scale. When laying it out as a sphere, you can then make some color observations. Slicing through this sphere vertically, we can see the range of values in chroma for one specific hue. Slicing through the sphere horizontally shows the chroma of all the hues at a specific value. Munsell made charts to categorize color. He would start with a color and then add a little bit of gray, a little bit of gray, a little bit of gray, until he finally got to the middle grayscale that you couldn't see the hue very much. When he laid out this chart, it was like a grid where you could actually call out a certain color based on the hue, the value, and the chroma. This example would be labeled a B48. So we would know it's a blue, a value of 4, and a chroma of 8. As Munsell worked on these colors, he realized that different hues have their strongest chroma attained at different values. You can see this at this example, that one color has the most range at the top end of the scale, and the other color has the most range at the bottom end of the value scale. Putting them all together, we see that this sphere is not really a sphere, but rather oblong shape, where some colors extend beyond a shape of a perfect sphere, and others not so. When deciding on color in a space, we need to consider color balance. Color balance is where all the colors in a space work together without one being more pronounced. In this example, red and green balance pretty well. They're equally in each color's in brightness and saturation, pretty good. However, when you get to different color ranges such as blue and orange, which are also opposites, they don't balance quite equally. In other words, that blue really carries a lot more weight than the orange does, and so you need more orange than blue for this balance to work out. And it's even more noticeable in yellow and violet, where just a little bit of violet can balance out a lot of yellow. Should you require colors of equal amounts for a specific project, but you still wish to achieve a color balance, you can adjust the chroma and value. In this example, the value of blue was raised and the chroma lowered a little bit, while the yellow was made lowered also just a little bit in value. And just doing that little tweaking creates a situation where both colors could be of equal amounts in the space and still would be balanced. Hues are displayed in a variety of ways, known as color models. A color model is a set category of colors that can be combined to produce a larger set. Color models use the following hierarchies in ordering their colors. Primary colors are those colors that cannot be reproduced. Secondary colors are those that are created by combining equal parts of two primary colors. And tertiary colors are created by combining equal parts of a secondary and a primary color. Beyond that are complex colors, and they're typically not located on color models. The first one is scientific, the color of light. This is also known as additive, or RGB. So this model describes how the hues in white light interact. So the primary colors for this set is red, blue, and green, with secondary hues of yellow, magenta, and cyan. That if you put all these colors together, you get white light. Our monitors have this. That's why we have R, B, and G settings when we work on graphics on our monitors. Printer's color, however, the color of printed media, subtractive, or CMYK, because the primary colors are magenta, cyan, and yellow. And these colors, then when you print over each other, theoretically make black when you put them together, but in reality, it becomes a muddy brown. And so we usually have black as another color. And that's why when you buy these ink cartridges for your printer, they're CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and K for the black. And that is why sometimes when you see something on a screen and print it, it may not print exactly the same. Because from screen to print, the computer is converting RGB color to CMYK color, and they don't quite line up one-to-one. Some computer programs that you purchase take that into account and have settings so that the colors match much better. Colorant is the color of paint, and it's used in paints, and those colors are red, blue, and yellow. And the secondary colors are orange, green, and violet. Again, if you mix all these colors together, you theoretically get black, but that's not really the case. So you also need white and black. Now, as for the colorant wheel, there's still two different versions of that. One of them is a perceptual, and one of this is a conceptual. Perceptual is how you see the colors. Perhaps you, as a kid, played a game where you stared at a red picture for a long time on a page and then looked away onto the white side of the page and there was like an after image. Perhaps it was a bluish green after image. So the opposite of each color in the perceptual model is what would appear after staring and looking away, how you perceive the color. Putting that together, you get this perceptual color wheel that's slightly different than the conceptual one. The conceptual one is what you mix to get the other colors. So for example, the opposite of red, you mix the colors equally apart, which are blue and yellow, to get green. So the opposite of red is green. Whereas the opposite of red in the perceptual is more like a blue-green, because that's what you'd see when you look away. Once you have a certain organizational scheme selected, whether perceptual or conceptual, you can then start making some observations and associations with the colors and how they're going to work together. In both wheels, we have warm and cool colors. However, in the perceptual ones, there's a couple of colors that can go either way depending on what's adjacent to them. You can see the warm colors are obviously, the reds and the yellows and oranges and kind of a yellowish green. But then we come up to these greens or this red-violet kind of color that really could fall one way or the other depending if the colors adjacent are cool or warm. Again, perceptual deals more with how it's perceived. The conceptual are pretty clear. The warm colors tend to be in the reds, the yellows range, and the cool colors in the blues and the greens range. It's pretty standard. Instead of bouncing back and forth between perceptual and conceptual, let's stick with the conceptual model for the rest of these color observations. It is important to categorize colors as warm or cool because of the way we perceive them. Cool colors tend to receive, and warm colors tend to advance. These two images, taken from a color magazine, show a room, and they are both sized the same size and scaled the same scale factor, and cropped to about the same view. The warm color scheme seems to be a smaller room than the cool color scheme. Here's another example of a space. Again, the red colored room seems closer to the camera than the green colored space. Yet it is the same space. It is amazing how much adjacent color can affect our perception. In this example, from the archimedeslab.org, these almond-shaped lozenges are all the same color. The reason they look so different is because of the adjacent color. When putting a band of color through them to negate the adjacent color effect, it is obvious that the lozenges are all the same color. Lighting in a room also plays an effect. This blue wall is the same color, but whether it's regular sunlight in the space, incandescent light in the room, the flash photography, the color of light changes how you perceive the space. Adjacent color can affect how we see warm or cool colors as well. In this example, one side of the lizard was colored in a magenta color, a cool color, and the other side a red color. But because of the background, it all seems equal. This analogy could be similar to how on a 50-degree day in July we might feel cool, and a 50-degree day in January we might feel warm. Here are two other color examples. In the top group, the band of orange is the same all the way across, and yet with the yellow background, the orange looks dark, but with the red background, the orange looks lighter. Similarly, the gray band down below is one color, but because one side is kind of bluish, the gray looks kind of yellow, and the other side being a yellowish background makes the gray look bluish. Let's turn back to the colorant color wheel to review our terminology. Primary colors are those colors that cannot be reproduced by mixing. In our colorant color wheel, that's red, blue, and yellow. Secondary colors are made by equal parts of primary colors. So equal part of red and equal part of yellow will create a secondary orange. Equal part of yellow and blue, green, and blue and red, violet. And tertiary colors are created by mixing equal parts of a secondary and a primary. And the name of the color is where they came from. So example, red-orange came from mixing red and orange. Blue-green from blue and green. Beyond that are considered complex colors, and they're typically not shown on a wheel. Almost all colors can be traced back to those 12 colors on the wheel. And so the first thing you need to look at when you look at a color, you ask yourself, well, what color family? What's the hue? And then after you see the hue, verify the value and the chroma. So these three are all in the yellow-green family. They're all yellow-green colors. And then once we know where they are in the color wheel, we can make some color associations. And remember that adjacent colors affect how we perceive a color. Let's look at some basic schemes. One of the simpler schemes is a hue with a neutral. And in these schemes, grays or color may dominate. It depends. This is an example of one such scheme. Usually you use a hue and a neutral in place where colors is not as important a piece. For example, a site plan, perhaps a wall section, something of that nature, where you don't need to have specific colors shown, but you want to show some differentiation of the different parts. Monochromatic is also a very common scheme in that we take one color and then work with the values of that color. And it's usually very restful. Monochromatic is a very restful type of scheme. To get interest, though, that restful schemes needs to have contrast in value or chroma or variation. In this example, one side goes from light to dark, the other one goes from dark to light. The interplay between the two makes it interesting. Here's another example of a monochromatic scheme. Very restful, and the colors work well together. Analogous schemes are colors side by side on the wheel. It works the best when they are definitely warm or definitely cool. The interest in it depends on the variation of intensity or value. Analogous schemes also tend to be very common and popular to do. Here's an example of an analogous scheme. We have yellow, orange, and red, and then grays in the background so the building stands out. Here's an interesting image showing the analogous idea with progression as well. So the building at this end is green. The building at this end tends to be this purpley red. And the progression goes across that streetscape. It could be a very interesting streetscape. This building works well with this one because they are analogous. This one works with this one because they are analogous, and so forth. So each building side by side becomes analogous. And this progression was put together looking at the Munsell color sphere, applying certain colors to certain parts of the building, making an interesting streetscape. A couple of analogous schemes here. We also have ceilings and floors that come into play. They are surfaces that have color and can affect the room. Here's a blue, violet, violet scheme. Yellow, yellow, orange, and orange scheme. Complementary. These colors tend to be dramatic and vigorous. When using complementary colors, take care not to use strong chroma because that can create a very strong effect. In this one, that green and that red really are fighting for your attention. On the right example, they were both toned down. The chroma has been toned down, and some of the value was moderated so that these pairs of colors work better together. This example shows a couple of successful complementary schemes. Notice how the violet in the left example is lightened up quite a bit. This is showing color balancing that we discussed earlier. By lightening the violet, it doesn't overwhelm the yellow. In the right example, the chroma of the blue has been toned down so much it's almost a gray. If the chroma of the blue was as strong as the orange, the room would have been overwhelming. Split complementary is another way of having some sort of tension between the colors, some sort of dynamics between the colors, but instead of being directly across and straight across, which will give us the most dynamic element, we go to the sides, and that kind of gives us some interest without having that jarring sensation. Here's an example of violet, orange, and green. Double complementaries are interesting in that you choose a color and its opposite, but then also it's adjacent. So in this case, the opposite of this color is this one, the yellow, green, and the red, violet. And then this one, the yellow, orange, and the blue, violet, kind of go back, are opposite from each other, but they are adjacent to each other as well. There's kind of a dual mode. It creates a very complex situation, and it could get a little bit too much. So in this scheme here, we see orange, blue, green, and red all together. And you can see right now there's quite a bit of dynamism going on here. There's a lot of things going on. Your eyes are moving a lot throughout it. It's a very active space. On the other side, the bedroom, the same thing too. There's a lot of color, a lot of play, a lot of texture. That also creates a lot of dynamics. Sometimes in this kind of color scheme, it's better if you use a 60-30-10 rule so that the largest area, which tend to be the walls, account for 60% of a room's color. And that's going to be like the biggest color factor, followed by window treatments and upholstery, which is about 30% more, and then accessories 10% more. This is a good way to balance all these out. Finally, a triadic scheme is from hues that are equidistant from each other. And one of the most common triadic schemes is yellow, blue, and red. Here are two examples of triadic schemes. They both use violet, orange, and green, the secondary colors. In both, the chroma of the violet has been weakened to better work with the other colors. In the left scheme, the green has also been lightened so the room has color balance. In the right, however, you can see how the green dominates the room since its chroma is pretty intense. That was the desired effect for this space. The wall was to be a focal point. However, additional elements of black are sprinkled throughout to help balance the room. Finally, what we call many-hued schemes. In this scheme, we want to repeat a pattern or an element so the room does not become too cluttered, because the colors are all over the place. Some color schemes are important in historical references. And there are some paint companies, this is an example of the Mounts paint color scheme, where they have researched these colors went together in buildings of this particular time period or this particular style. And so if you use these colors, they will work well and it would match the historical period of the time. This is a product you have probably seen in art supply stores. It is a disc with a pin in the middle that lets the middle portion rotate. On both sides, we can see the color wheel. One side shows color associations, and the other side shows color mixing. There's some places online, this colorschemedesigner.com, although it's made for web design, can certainly work for other things as well. And you can decide what kind of schemes you're looking for, and they'll show you color combinations that could work together. And you can see whether or not you like the effect of the choices you've made. Another color source is color.adobe.com. This one you show the color wheel you're looking for. I click on the circles down here and they'll show you where on the wheel it is. And this also gives you the RGB of the color, which is good. A good suggestion when you work in a space is to paint an area, maybe about 5 feet by 5 feet. Get a small batch of color and test an area and see what it looks like. Look at it in direct sunlight. Look at it in indirect sunlight. Look at artificial light and compare that to color chip. Larger areas of color will appear darker than what's on a chip, and colors are affected by those around them as well. A touch of color might be what a space needs. In this particular example, from a book called Home by Design, you can see that one wall is painted blue, and that looks so much better if it was all painted white. So if the whole space was white, it's still the same space, but that one wall being blue gives that one accent, and it really makes the space more interesting. Color doesn't have to be strong either. This example here, where this wall is just a tad darker than the molding in the room. If it was all white, the molding wouldn't pop out. But by having that wall just a tad softer gray, just a tad softer color, all of a sudden it makes the molding in the room, which is a special part of the room, more defined. Another good color tip is to take a cue from nature. The ground is dark, the sky is bright, and maybe our spaces should be that way too when we paint different areas of a room. And this is the example here. Here's where a light color is at the top, medium color, and then a dark color at the bottom. And this looks balanced. In this design, that middle section seems awfully heavy and almost like it's teetering. Which is better, to paint the ceiling white or to keep it this darker natural tone? What you need to consider is, what is the intent? If you want the space to have some openness and some airiness and some brightness, well then painting the ceiling white is the way to go, because it does open up the space. If, however, you want some coziness in that space, maybe you want it to feel comfort and kind of cocooned, well then the darker ceiling is the correct choice, so you feel that you're protected. So different colors can be used in a space, and depending on the intent, it could still be fine. When you start deciding which colors to use, consider the mood you want expressed. Is it warm and cozy, rich and refined? Is it verdant or cool? Then use the information in this presentation to select colors that will work well together and express this design intent. One other tool I want to make you aware of is this app I found for Benjamin Moore. What's good about it is that not only does it give you a color range, but it gives you the actual number that they sell and also the name and the model number. Which kind of brings us to our assignment. You have a color exercise PDF, and you will need to print out the first page at least, and if possible, the first and second page so you can see it. The second and third pages are the same, except that the second page is all black and white and third page is color. So some students don't have color printers, some students do, and some students would just rather print black and white. Maybe the ink is too low. That is fine. Either way is fine. These two would be the second and third pages of the PDF. Again, you don't have to print them all out. You can just print the first page or the first and second page and use them to create the rest of the sheet. What you'll be working on is this first page. So minimum to printout would be the first page. What the assignment is to go to a paint store, either Home Depot, Menards, or Lowe's, and get color samples. Now, I do not want you to go to Walmart or Target. I don't know if they have sufficient range of color chips to choose from. So Home Depot, Menards, or Lowe's, or actually go to a paint store. There's a Sherwin-Williams, there's a Benjamin Moore paint store, in which case go to those. But you want to go to a store that has a wide selection of colors to choose from, and then find samples of the color relationships that are going to be used in your project. When you do go, it is best for you to think about the colors you're planning on. So in other words, in your mind, pick a starting color and then pick out the color chips you're going to use to put onto an assignment. And I do want you to have physical chips and work with physical chips, because sometimes you will put a design board up or something with color chips. You need to know how to cut and glue and paste them and organize your project so it makes sense. So definitely we want you to do that. Work with physical things. You will have a piece of paper that you can touch and hold with your hand in the future when you get done with this assignment. So there's two parts, and this sometimes fools students or something, but there's two parts. The top part has nothing to do with the bottom part. They're totally two different parts. In other words, this is one thing, this is another thing. Two different pieces. The top one, I want you to put together a color scheme, either a primary or a secondary color scheme. Once you decide which one you're going to do, whether it's primary or secondary, cut the chips out, find paint chips, cut the chips out, and then paste them up here, here, and here. Underneath them, you need to write down legibly the paint chip number or the paint chip name and the color family. And by the way, you would use only one manufacturer for the whole thing. So either you're going to use, Glidden or Benjamin Moore, whatever, Sherwin-Williams, one paint company manufacturer for all the paint chips that you have. All right. So you'll write down the name and then also underneath the color family. What's the color family, you ask? But these are the major colors of the color family right here. Those are the only ones you're going to put down here underneath. You'll have the color, the chip name and color, and then the color family. The second part, you're going to pick one color, and I usually tell students just pick your favorite color because you're going to be using that color a lot, right? So use one color here for all the color schemes. Then, with that color selected, again from that paint sample company, you'll write down that paint chip, color, and the color family it falls in. Then make a monochromatic scheme here. So this chip and this chip plus this chip will be monochromatic. Again, write the information there. This chip and this chip and this chip will be analogous. And so forth. This one, this one, this one, this one's going to be double complementary. This one, and this one is split, and this one is complementary. Pages 2 and 3 show graphic examples of the different types of schemes. So that's why I said you don't have to print them out if you know them, or if you can go to them on your phone easily or whatever. But you start with a color. And the one thing you have to always think about is, what is the main color? Let's go back. What is this main color that's going to happen to everyone? So for example, this one here, this is the main color, and this is the split complementary. Again, looking at the video, they'll tell you what that means. But if I said this was the main color, well, that and that are not the split complementary of that color. It's a whole different bank of colors. So just kind of be aware of that. Depending what the main color is will depend what the split complementary or the analogous or double or monochromatic would be. So here again, this is the main color, and this would be the analogous colors to the main color. This is one of the double complementary. This is the primary color, and so these ones are chosen. And this one, for example, is a monochromatic idea that it would all be the same blue, just lighter or darker. And so here's a kind of a breakdown of what was in the video. Now I'm looking for it to look professional. So this particular student cut these out nicely to fill up the whole blocks. And then they had these rub-on letters that they found or they purchased somewhere, and they put it together. Notice they even typed nicely the color information underneath. And there it is. Notice this is the one color. This is the one color that they started off with. And then these are all basing off that main color. Now, this is an assignment that was actually submitted by a student. And I'll be honest, this is basically almost a 0. Think about this. Anything you submit to any instructor in this program needs to be the best you can possibly do. You're showing off the skills and you're showing your professionalism. So this is very important to be aware of. These aren't quite as exciting or as nice as this one was, but that's okay. These still look very professional. And you can see that this person took their time in putting this here and writing their names and what it's called. They've made sure they got the name up here. So, I mean, it looks really good. This one did very well too. Would have liked a little bit more organization, but you know what? This is relatively nicely cut. I mean, it's not that far off the mark. And it looks like they took some care on getting it there. When we put this together, you still have to send it and upload it. We still are going to have to upload it in the end. So you're going to be able to take a picture of it. This is a little too fuzzy. I have a hard time reading this. So if it was just a little crisper, I would accept it 100%. I asked this person to just retake the picture, but only, and they didn't lose points on that, but retake the picture because it was just too fuzzy. I gave you the sheet. I really want you to use the sheet I gave you. But this person, for some reason, couldn't get to the printer in time or didn't know how to use the printer. You've been given a certain number of prints to and be able to make every semester. So use them up. It should not cost you anything to make a print that you can use. So this person, for some reason, decided to do it this way. And this works too. I mean, it's still nicely cut. They did write well. I know what they're trying to do. So, okay, I will accept it. Don't forget to circle that primary or secondary. Which, by the way, the examples I've shown you are not necessarily 100% correct. All I'm saying is they were done well enough to get credit. And so, I mean, if it's not correct, I'd send it back to revise or submit. But at least it wasn't kind of slapped together, some of these. Notice in this particular one, there's something missing. In other words, they did circle that, great. They did put the names here, fine. But what is the color family? What is the color family? Cobalt C is not a color family. Cobalt C is the name of the color. That's basically that top part. Even though it did 2 lines of it, it's basically just the top part. The color family, remember, the color family needs to be one of these. Because once you have one of these, you know where it falls on the color wheel. And then we can decide the colors to use, that works with it. So these are the only color families you can use. And it's the 12 major color families that there are. So on this family range, is there pink? Nope. Pink is basically a red. And the pink is basically a light red. Excuse me, if you add white to red, you will get a pink. But there is no pink color family. Is there a teal? No, there is not. A teal is basically a blue-green. So it's a blue-green that we call teal, and it's a certain range of blue-green, but it's still a blue-green. Is there something called deep blue? Is that a color family? No, it is not. Deep blue is not a color family. Blue is, and blue-violet is. Deep blue is not. So just kind of be aware of that. I've had these kind of names put down there. These are the only ones you should put underneath. And if you have any questions on that, come get a hold of me. All right, so here's an analogous color scheme a student submitted at one time. And so the question I have for you is, does this work for analogous? So this is the major color that they wanted, that they put there. And then they put these two next to it saying these are the analogous colors. All right, well, let's take a look at that. So here's the color wheel. And we're saying that yellow is the main color, right? That's what I'm telling you. It's the main color. So here's the main color. And the analogous color of the main color are the ones adjacent to it. So is yellow, orange, and orange adjacent to it, right? Like right next to it? Well, the answer is no. Yellow, green, and yellow, orange are the analogous color to yellow. So depending on where the main color is, which is that main first color that is selected, will determine what the colors you're going to pick for the rest of the sheet. So the analogous color scheme is, if this were yellow, orange, and this was yellow and this was orange, then that would have been correct. But they said, no, my favorite color is yellow. I want to have a yellow scheme. These are not the analogous colors for yellow. So that's important. Also, if you pick a color and you say a color is yellow-orange, don't tell me the same color is orange somewhere else. So in other words, this is blue-violet and this is blue-violet, and they're the same color, amethyst sky. Yes, that's great. But this one, the student says was yellow-orange. And then the student says this is orange. And it's both this crab claw, number NT551. Well, that can't be the same. Either this is yellow-orange, and in which case this is yellow-orange, or this is orange and this is orange. I mean, you can't tell me the same color is being used to represent two different colors on the color wheel. That doesn't work that way. So, for the next time we get together, I would like for the color exercise two things to be done. The first row, that first part, the primary or secondary, and just pick the color you're going to use in that first column. So you're going to have one color chip here, and you're going to have three color chips here. These three color chips will either show a primary scheme or a secondary scheme. And this color chip will just be a single color that you're going to use to finish out the rest of this project. So it doesn't have to be fully done yet. Ideally, make sure that you write the color chip family and the paint chip color or name. So I need to have that, and these are the family. I've said that quite a bit today. I have two PDFs for you to read through. Choosing colors is tricky. You need to kind of be working through that. Read 7 tips for picking color, and then how to choose colors, PDFs in the session folder. And more videos to watch. We're going to have about an hour's worth of videos. This particular class, because I had to do it this way this time around, and I'd like to apologize, but it's out of my control, really. We're watching quite a few videos, and I would definitely like you to take your time, if you need to, pause and do some of the stuff that you're seeing there, or maybe take notes, or even write down some questions and send me some questions and say, hey, on such and such timestamp you said this. Is that what you meant to do? So, but these ones here, again, looking at them, I'd like to start working with components next time, and so we're going to do a lot of stuff here on components. So looking at them, you can see there's a lot of them. Component basic, more components, and then it's more on inferencing again. Last set of videos there was inferencing, and I really do hope you're keeping up on these videos. I'm expecting you to have seen them and known them moving forward, so hopefully you've done that. And so here's the last slide of the lecture. And so by the beginning of next session, I need you to sketch your bedroom on paper, and you need to show that to me at the beginning of class for credit. So it's got to be done well enough to get credit for it. Review the color concept video, and there's a link there. All the links, by the way, of all the videos here are down below too. It's on the lecture too. So if you go to the lecture PDF in the student project files folder, you'd have that there. Complete the first row and column for the color exercise by next session. And the next time we meet, make sure it's done by then. I'd like you to read the 7 tips for picking colors and how to choose colors. Then also complete the third chair. If you haven't been able to get it done, some groups did, some groups did not. Complete the third chair up to the lecture. And then you can review the steps again by looking at this video. So, also, the other videos, the tape measure, the more guys, and all those videos there to look as well. And if you can, do what is done on the video. Actually make a little video and just kind of do it, pause it, and start it up again. It's going to be very helpful to do that because the more you practice, the better off you'll be. And note the bottom here, to be submitted to Talon, note the due date and time. You're going to complete the third chair, complete the table, paint table and third chair to match, and then upload to one Dropbox. It goes, that whole thing goes up to one Dropbox. Again, sorry that I've not been able to come this time around. Make sure if you have any questions, you get a hold of me and we'll work things out. Thank you for your time.